Having spent yet another day of unpaid overtime, Kuroto Nakano checks his phone to distract himself from his pain within. Seeing a voicemail from his mother, he groans knowing that he won't have the time to see her for yet another year. As the days go by, the months and years only fly with it. For so long, all the people he knew as family and friends were people he could no longer see. Having this be drilled in for yet another day, his exhaustion refuses to waver. That stress, turmoil, and loneliness manifests itself into a dark, physical form when he takes the train back home. With nothing left to do but open his door, change his clothes, bathe, and then sleep, that negative energy only festers further. That is, until he cracks his door wide open to find a mysterious girl. Her name is Senko, an eternal being who's been tasked with pampering him to his heart's content. Now, there's only one question he must answer. Is it okay to relax? This is Sewayaki Kitsune no仙狐さん, or The Helpful Fox Senko-san in English, and it's one of my favorite anime of all time. But how? Isn't this just stupid wish fulfillment? Well, that's precisely what it is, but that doesn't mean that it still can't provide any value as a story. If it didn't, I would have forgotten about the series after I watched it, but I instead loved it to the point where I picked up the manga and have since read through all of the author's works. But what led me to Senko-san? Well, I first picked it up when I was in high school. I was 16 at the time. Around that period, I was a very busy person. Along with balancing my life at school, I also took the YouTube grind incredibly seriously. I would upload video essays about games and anime every single week to mostly mediocre quality, all in the hopes that I could get a career out of making videos. I was such a hard worker in high school that sometimes I'd find myself exhausted, wishing I'd lived a normal life, that I could have spent more time with my friends and family. That's ultimately why the escapism of Senko-san appealed to me at the time. But it goes without saying that 3 years later, I'm a different person now. I care a lot more about the people around me, and I've made great lengths to treat YouTube as a hobby instead of a career goal. As a result, other holes have come into my life, but I know that I'll eventually be able to fill them in. So then, if I don't need an anime like Senko-san, then why am I even talking about it? Why is it that it continues to be so good to me even as an adult? Well, that's exactly why I'm making this. When Nakano meets Senko, he reacts as anyone would, thinking he's hallucinating. The idea of a small fox girl barging into his house and cooking him a meal is so preposterous that instantly closing the door to his apartment would only be reasonable. Regardless, Nakano ultimately decides to give Senko a chance, not wanting to feel bad for neglecting her. When he does, a wave of warm nostalgia rushes through him. This girl may be a complete stranger to him, but somehow, having a meal with another person is enough to make her feel like family, bringing back the times he'd spend eating with his grandma. Having found himself on Senko's lap, Nakano has a strange dream. He sees a man who looks just like him having an interaction with Senko. Senko did say she's indebted to his family, but given how unlikely the scenario felt, Nakano chooses to brush it off when he awakens. Once he does, he's in full acceptance of having Senko help him. Having felt trapped in his career with no life outside of it, the warmth of getting to spend time with someone else is enough to truly convince him that Senko is someone worth keeping in his life. Senko herself is very much left as a mystery when they meet, and that keeps up for a very long time. While the answers for why Senko helps Nakano are where the manga is able to get into its best content, said content wouldn't be nearly as impactful if we didn't care about the characters. That's why this first episode is such a simple conversation. There's foreshadowing, sure, but it's also a simple slice of life at its core. While this slow burn style of storytelling can be tedious and frustrating under the wrong hands, Senko-san manages to freshen up this format with one key ingredient. Iyashikei is a genre of anime that translates to healing system. These anime are generally meant to be relaxing and calming. Oftentimes, I feel like the tag gets slapped on rather liberally, which makes sense as it acts more as a theme than a genre. There aren't too many anime where the point is the Iyashikei aspect, which is why Senko-san stands out to me so much. In order to prioritize this calming feeling, a lot of work had to be done, and it's not just the writing that helps with this aspect. With all of my my videos, I try to express my love for both the anime and the manga, and they both do a great job at conducting this warm and cozy feeling. The anime adaptation was handled by Doga Kobo, a studio whose latest adaptations have been some of the most visually impressive in the industry. But back in 2019, their visuals weren't as flashy, and it meant that the anime needed to impress elsewhere. It's not to say that the animation is bad though, as it's generally quite good for a slice of life. Regardless, the anime's most impressive traits come elsewhere. The voice acting is great. For now, I won't mention the other characters, but I love the performances that Azumiwaki and Junichi Suwabe give Senko and Nakano. Nakano's voice is very calming, and Junichi Suwabe is able to capture his emotions from exhaustion to relaxation very well. Meanwhile, Senko's voice is expectedly very cutesy, and Azumiwaki is able to make the character sound cute while also having a tinge of wisdom around the character to make her sound unique. A very underrated aspect of what makes the show so calming too is the OST. I'll start playing it now so you can give it a listen, and more songs will be in the description. Given the supernatural nature of Senko's character, the OST takes on a very traditional Japanese sound, using lots of pianos, woodwinds, and string instruments throughout each song. The addition of accordions also really helps out as well to make it sound unlike any other anime OST. The relaxing sound works very well in context, but it's also quite useful for studying and sleeping, two things which I'm sure many of us could use. My only real complaint with it is that the OST is unfortunately very small, but when the anime is only 12 episodes and the OST is as good as it is, I can't help but be forgiving of that fact. But I haven't even brought up the best aspect of the adaptation. Although that will have to wait. At this point, you're probably thinking the following. Cool, this show seems really relaxing. So what? If the production values are adequate, that's nice, but what about the writing? Like, that is the most important thing. Luckily for you, the writing is quite good. As Nakano is the protagonist, the story follows his character arc, and they get into developing it very early on. While that first episode is focused on merely establishing who Nakano and Senko are, the following ones focus more on their dynamic. As Nakano is an adult, he thinks he has everything figured out, given how he works, has a house, and is able to keep that house clean. While the help of Senko does increase his quality of life, he ultimately feels bad for how much he needs to rely on her. Pretty much all the anime is focused on Senko helping Nakano with something he didn't know he needed help with. The first time this happens though, Nakano is adverse to it. While there's surely a lick of stubborn pride within him, the main reason for this is that he just feels bad. Since he's an adult, he thinks he shouldn't need the help of someone else, that he's a burden if he receives help. That's why Senko's responses are always so important. One of her most common quotes is, "If that's the case, then what other reason would you need to put a smile on someone's face?" While Senko-san looks like a bunch of disconnected pieces put into an anime and manga, the central theme that the show focuses on as soon as the second episode is that it does nothing to carry your burdens on your own. If you want to live a fulfilling life, you'll need to accept the help, care, and kindness of others. That right there is the reason this series manages to stay so captivating despite how innocuous it seems. It's that central message and theme that gets built upon as the series carries on. One thing I really love about Senko-san is how conservative it is with introducing new characters. By the end of the manga, there are plenty, but the anime only has 5, and it takes until the 3rd episode for another character to be introduced. I'm happy with this approach, and I think it suits the series very well. Keeping the focus on Nakano and Senko allows for the relaxing Iyashike moments to shine, while also letting the thematic focus stay on Nakano. Even so, I find that the side characters are who really flesh out this world and round out this show's biggest strengths, even if this isn't immediately obvious. The first of these characters to be introduced is Kouenji, and is Nakano's next door neighbor. While she's originally introduced as a threat to Nakano and Senko, wanting nothing to do with how noisy they are, she's quickly revealed to be a lovable otaku, mistaking Senko for a cosplayer. After that, it doesn't take too long before she falls in love with Senko's cooking and cute appearance, willing to disregard her noise complaints as a result. It goes without saying, but Kouenji isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and that's what makes her so entertaining, having by far the funniest moments in a series that would otherwise be lacking in comedy. But Kouenji's greatest strengths as a character don't come in until later. As for this moment, Nakano and Senko are slowly growing their bond. More standard scenes of Senko helping Nakano are also interspersed with more interesting ideas, like them going to a grocery store together. This particular scene always stands out to me. It starts out very samey, with Nakano worrying if Senko can get around without people noticing her ears and tail. While his thoughts are initially taken over by him wanting to return the favor to Senko, he later drops it entirely due to just how much fun he's having. It's at that moment that he realizes that all he needs to do to return that favor is to be happy with her company. She's doing this for him, so if he can't enjoy himself, then all of her effort would be for naught. This scene is so pivotal to me because it's the first time Nakano truly learns something new. Even so, it's not even like Nakano is completely useless to Senko. While Senko is shown with little to no flaws, a crack within her does show up in the next episode when she's left all alone. Senko, being as old as she is very bad with technology. For the first time, we get to see Senko fail at something when she tries new thing after new thing, and it's when Nakano returns that he's able to give her the help that she needs. For once, he gets to see Senko mess something up, and while it embarrasses her, Nakano likes seeing this more human side to her. It goes without saying, but it's a very important moment for developing their bond, and lowering the gap between them. But even with their growing bond, Senko still hasn't lifted Nakano's curse, which is why Senko's friend Shiro flies in to do it herself. While Senko is characterized as very caring and motherly, Shiro is a lot more impulsive and pushy. By this point, it's clear that Nakano can have fun with Shiro, but that Shiro's strengths don't quite compute for removing the curse. This introduction isn't only interesting for showcasing Shiro, but also for showing a more jealous side to Senko. It doesn't last long given Shiro's incompetence, but it can be gauged. In the episode, Shiro starts it by making the assumption that Senko isn't competent enough to end the curse. But when she fails to do so herself, somewhere deep inside her mind, she has to acknowledge Senko's patience and resilience. Despite how grateful Nakano is towards Senko, he is in a state where no one even knows how to end his curse. What's so interesting about this scene is that it showcases how the average divine messenger fox sees humans. To Shiro, making Nakano happy is nothing but a job to her, while Senko has a history of Nakano's family that gives her far more personal stake in keeping him healthy. So yeah, this is a really good scene that does a great job at further characterizing Senko. But what about Shiro? Is there anything to analyze about her? Well, before I read the manga, I'd say that there isn't. I didn't quite understand what Shiro added to the story. Sure, she's a lot of fun, her personality being very different from Senko, but she doesn't have much of anything to do with Senko and Nakano on a thematic level. Thankfully, my questions were answered when I read the manga. When I brought up that Kouenji had more to her, I wasn't lying. While Kouenji isn't literally cursed like Nakano is, she still is a very exhausted person. She's a college student living on her own, and she draws manga to make her ends meet. Not only is her room an absolute mess, but she later states in the manga that she never had friends. As a result, she's meant to mirror Nakano in quite a few ways, but the main difference between them comes in their age. Nakano is implied to be somewhere in his late 20s or early 30s, while Kouenji is likely in her early 20s. Given how long Nakano is consumed with his curse, he needs someone more specialized in helping him. That's why Senko is such a strong fit for him. Kouenji, on the other hand, just needs a good friend that can prevent her from going crazy. That's where Shiro comes in. She may be completely useless at almost every human task, but her playful personality makes her a great friend to Kouenji. While Kouenji doesn't need as much growth as Nakano does, that doesn't mean that seeing her growth and development isn't fun in any way. And yes, I do know that their friendship did technically exist in the anime, but it didn't have any time to marinate in that format. As Kouenji and Shiro aren't the focus of the series, any development with them happens very gradually and subtly, a subtlety that the anime could not convey in 12 episodes. That doesn't mean that I dislike them in the anime though. In fact, they're a ton of fun. Kouenji's otaku perspective and Shiro's general lack of maturity play off so well off of Senko's wise demeanor and Nakano's low-key personality. By the time we get to the manga, I'd be bursting with laughter reading any chapters they're in together. They are so funny, and that's coupled in with some truly heartwarming moments that make their friendship all the more believable. There are too many to count, but my favorites always come from when Kouenji opens up to Shiro about how much she means to her. Since Kouenji is, to put it bluntly, kinda dumb, Shiro always assumed that she never caught on to her supernatural nature. Later though, she reveals that she did know, but that she didn't want to tell her in fear that said knowledge could break them apart, something she doesn't want when she's finally found such a good friend. Another one comes up close to the manga's conclusion, where Shiro is about to risk decades of punishment for not doing her job one day. But Kouenji is able to save her just through declaring how much she cares for her, and how Shiro is such a kind person that she's able to disregard her duties just to make Kouenji happy. Beyond those funny moments, Kouenji and Shiro make one of my favorite friendships in any manga I've ever read, and their roles as these secondary main characters allows for those moments to truly shine, them always getting the time they need to cement themselves as star players in the manga. But that's not to say that Shiro is entirely disconnected from Nakano's development, as she actually gets one of my favorite scenes in the series. Taking place 2 episodes after her introduction, Nakano works so late that he misses the train home. Thankfully for him, Shiro offers to take him back under the condition that he buys her a hot dog. What I love about this scene is that it's able to keep Shiro in character while also developing her. If she stayed as arrogant as she was, I don't know if she would have become as endearing as she is. So seeing her help Nakano like this is a really big step for her character. It really does demonstrate just how much respect she grew to have for Senko in her previous interactions with her. But that's not the only reason she showed up. Genuinely concerned for both him and Senko, she explains to Nakano that Senko may not see him for who he is, but rather the ancestor that looked just like him. From a literal standpoint, the statement is clearly bullshit, especially if you know Senko's backstory. However, that's not how this was meant to be read, and Nakano gets that. I absolutely love his response here.
それでもいいかなって思えたんです。理由やきっかけがどうであれ、仙子さんと過ごす今が幸せだから。
To him, it doesn't matter what Senko's intentions are, as long as they're happy. The reason why I love this scene so much is because we finally get to see Nakano be truly honest about his relationship with Senko. While he spent so much time worrying about being a burden, all the countless moments he's had with her have proven to him that she's someone he genuinely cares for. Sora is the final character to have made an appearance in the anime, and was first introduced in the otherwise uneventful beach episode, where she came to deliver one message. If you make Senko sad, something bad will happen. Nakano thought nothing of it at the time. He continued to have normal experiences with Senko until she appeared once more. With the anime only a few episodes away, Nakano's curse still shows no signs of wavering. Knowing this, Sora chooses to provoke Senko, claiming that Nakano's curse hasn't been lifted because she won't indulge in his obsession with her tail, turning an otherwise unnoteworthy running gag into an actual plot point. Presenting Nakano with her many tails, Senko gets defensive, proclaiming that Nakano is hers and hers only. While Senko claims she only did this out of motherly instinct, there's clearly more to it. However Senko feels, it's clearly something she isn't ready to think about. Nakano is only surprised by how Senko reacts. Throughout the entire story, he's never taken the fox's tails all that seriously, even if they're all embarrassed about it being touched. Senko only seemed to tolerate him petting her tail, so he didn't think much would come of touching Sora's tail. So when Senko stops him before he even can, it's certainly not an expected development. Although it is, because a moment like this couldn't have happened without the time we've gotten to see their relationship build up. And all of this is used brilliantly for the anime's conclusion. The anime's ending is fascinating to me due to how most of it is anime original, although it doesn't shy away from using a few manga chapters. The first one is rather significant, as it sees Senko brushing aside what happened to celebrate the start of the new spring season. Taking more than a few drinks, Nakano finally speaks honestly. He lets out his worries and frustrations, and after enough time, he does something he wasn't expecting to. He cries. After all these years of pent-up exhaustion, he finally cries. After all the time he spent trying not to worry Senko, trying to pretend he's okay, he's no longer able to hide it. Of course, Senko's always known about this more vulnerable side to him, but Nakano's never wanted to show it, not because he's scared of how she'll see him, but rather because he feels guilty for needing to rely on her as much as he does. But as Senko would, she consoles him, telling him that it's okay to cry, that it's okay to be open. This moment always hit me really hard, but those emotions came to a climax on my most recent watch of the anime because I had a very similar experience to this. I'm gonna get vulnerable for a bit, but I've known my friends ever since I was in middle school, and I tried to stand out as the funny guy in the room. Because of this, any vulnerabilities I could show were masked with unfunny jokes. However, in my junior year of high school, I broke. My friends got to see me crying and complaining about all the difficulties I'd faced in my life. I expected to be made fun of for this, but I was surprised to see them open up to me as well. It's a day I'll always remember as one of the most important in my life because it was the first day where I knew for certain that these were people I'd want to keep in my life forever. I may not relate to Nakano's reasons for not wanting to break down, but I can sure as hell relate to the catharsis that comes with breaking down, the feeling of finally feeling heard. The next day, Nakano gets a call from his mom, telling him that his dad's feeling unwell. Finally having a good reason to see them, he rushes to the train station. While his conversation with his mother is uneventful, he feels good being back home. Although it doesn't last forever. His boss calls him, telling him that they need extra help, which leaves Nakano with no other choice but to leave. On his way, however, he notices a flower in his front yard, awakening a long-lost memory. While Nakano had dreams of his ancestor of Senko, he also had one recurring dream of when he saw Senko as a kid. At that young age, he once found himself lost in the dreary forest, and it was Senko who helped return him to his grandmother, giving him a flower so he'd never forget her. As an adult, his memories have been regained, and he calls Senko to see if she's okay. He waits a few seconds, and then a few more, but it's clear that she doesn't have his phone. Terrified, remembering what Sora told him, he goes looking for Senko. He wonders if he really did cause a rift in their relationship that day, if crying in front of her really did make her feel hopeless for him. Not only is he scared of being pathetic, but he's also scared of hurting someone who he cares about, someone who will listen to him and be there for him. If he misses that, then what else does he have? He only dwells on those thoughts further once he doesn't see Senko in his house and doesn't find her anywhere outside. While before, he'd carry on as normal, having nothing to lose, he's finally found something to make those long days of work worth it. He's found something he wants to keep in his life. As the rain continues to fall, we see Senko's perspective. Sora asks why she's bothering to take care of someone who will die long before her final moments, confused at why she won't properly indulge him. That quote I mentioned earlier is more important than it may initially seem. While it may just seem like a way of removing Nakano from his worries and guilt, it's actually a showing of how Senko truly feels. Earlier, I discussed how Shiro only sees how she does as a job, before she gradually opens up to view Nakano as closer to an equal. Well, when Senko says that catchphrase, it's literally her telling Nakano that this isn't a job to her, that she does what she does because she cares about him. Knowing this, that's exactly what she tells Sora, and Sora ultimately concedes. After a long day pouring in rain, it finally washes away to reveal Senko in front of Nakano's eyes. I love this final episode. It's able to be tense and dramatic without annihilating the tone because of just how well built up their reunion was. Throughout the first season, Nakano's character arc was focused on letting him learn to relax and realizing that he doesn't need to tackle every problem on his own. Through growing closer to Senko and letting her see every aspect of himself, to remembering how it felt to be alone again, it's clear to say that Nakano's character arc is complete. So then, why are there still 70 more chapters of the manga left unadapted? Well, it's because Nakano's entire story has yet to be truly complete. While he resolved one inner conflict in the anime's first season, he still has many more lessons to learn and many more holes to fill. That's why it's so unfortunate to see that the anime will never continue. It's clear that this adaptation was made by people who love the source material, so it's nice that we at least got a tease of what Suzu's anime design would have looked like. But there's a lot more story left, so what do you need to know before getting into the manga? Well, I'd suggest reading from the very start. The mangaka Rimukuro treated the early chapters of Senko-san in a very simplistic way, with little progression in the overall plot. This is fine, but the anime takes those chapters and rearranges them to make a far more consistent and coherent overall narrative. There's also the art to consider. Rimukuro's art skills when he started Senko-san were nowhere near as good as they are now. It's not to say he was a bad artist though. In fact, his art looked quite good. It's just to say that the art style changes a ton by the end, and I'd say it was very much for the better. Rimukuro's become one of my favorite artists, and it's through reading Senko-san that you'll get to see the evolution of how he was able to create such consistently beautiful works with such a distinct art style. It's clear from seeing the anime that Rimukuro wanted to carry the same level of polish and care to a story that the crew at Dogakobo did, and it results in the manga eventually growing to surpass the anime in terms of its storytelling quality. But the manga takes its time to get to that point, although it's not to say that the initial chapters that follow the anime aren't good, as they're all very fun, funny, or relaxing in their own ways. It's just that none of them are particularly worth deeply analyzing until we are introduced to our next character. Suzu is a trainee, wishing to become a divine messenger fox like her idol Senko. She's hardworking and kind to a fault, although she lacks experience. When she meets Senko, she says that her number one goal is to make someone smile. When she asks Senko if she shares that goal, she says that he just started smiling. Suzu's true role in the story and themes of Senko-san don't get explored until near the end of the manga, so her introduction is mainly used as a vehicle for world building. The way that the Divine Messenger's world operated was a mystery that drove interest in the manga. We knew very little about Senko and her place in the world, so to see how expansive the world truly is while also getting to see what makes someone worthy of being in Senko's position was very nice to see. Another fun detail is the subtle jabs Suzu makes at Shiro, questioning how she even got to her position, and it's quite funny since Shiro's actual role in the world building was, and continues to be, very murky until much later into the manga, where we find out her job is to defeat evil spirits akin to a magical girl. So while Suzu doesn't start out incredibly interesting on her own, she does a great job at being the character that showcases just how much the manga is worth reading after watching the anime. But the world building doesn't end there, as Senko takes Nakano to the Fox world to heal an injury he attained. It's there that we meet Gin, Suzu's laid-back master. While Senko's been secretive about why she takes care of him, Gin is more than willing to give him a few hints. By this point of the story, Nakano's caught on to the curse, finally being able to see the black mist that constantly surrounds him. When you couple that with Senko claiming to be indebted to his family, there's certainly more to her presence than what meets the eye. Despite this, Nakano can't help but be scared of prying further. Maybe it has something to do with what Shiro once told him, or he doesn't want to risk losing what he currently has like Kouenji feared. Despite Gin telling Nakano to take care of Senko, there's nothing he can do to help her, and that feeling traps him. This is a feeling that I can very much relate to. There are many people in my life who I deeply love, but are deeply depressed, and ultimately, there's nothing major I can do to help. That's how I felt for the longest time, at least, but a thank you from a person like that truly goes a long way. Knowing that something as simple as being there for someone is enough to make their life just a little bit better. Nakano receives similar words when Gin tells him that he has been helping her. While Nakano's used to the bright and cheerful Senko we all know, she used to be lonely and reserved. Even if it's hard for him to understand due to his own self-esteem issues, he is making her happy. Gin may very rarely appear in the manga, but this reread has made me genuinely surprised by how good her introduction is. She's similar to Sora in how she likes to tease Senko, but has a deep, caring side to help her stand out. Within that time, Nakano's gotten plenty of smaller moments to help him grow. One of those sees him actively choosing to hang out with Kouenji to get Senko a present. Senko remarks how he's never been happy before he met her, but now that he's received her care, he's able to share his smile with other people. It's at that moment that Senko finally realizes that one day, she'll be alone again. Nakano will die long before she does, and even in his lifetime, he will come to meet so many more people than he did before. One of those people is Nakano's new co-worker Fukuda, and is easily the most important new character up to this point because of how well she shows off Nakano's growth as a character. While Nakano was nothing but a lifeless husk at his job, he's grown into an incredibly competent and kind individual. Even though Fukuda enters her job overwhelmed by the amount of work she has to do, Nakano helps train her through it and make those hours of overtime sting even just a little bit less, all because he knows it's the right thing to do. Without getting to see Senko's kindness improve his own life, he wouldn't have started going out of his way to help others. Hell, he even regurgitates some of Senko's ideas into his own words. If it wasn't made abundantly obvious, Fukuda falls in love with Nakano, something that could have only felt natural if we waited up to this point to introduce her. In my most popular video, I talked about a short manga Remukuro made about a hitman taking care of a little girl, and how it's a story about how treating others with kindness and respect will compel others to do the same. In a lot of ways, I consider that short story to be a very condensed version of one of Senko-san's core themes, which is funny because the manga doesn't even really get into it until halfway in with Fukuda's introduction. It's joked that Remukuro tries to fit Nakano into every manga he makes, with the hitman and Uji looking exactly like him. But I think that choice is more sound than it seems, because the hitman that goes out of his way to take care of someone else is thematically the same Nakano that makes work just that little bit easier for Fukuda. But showcasing Nakano's development isn't the only function Fukuda has in the story. The other one is how her existence relates to Senko. As we've tapped into Senko's fears, Nakano's ability to so effortlessly charm Fukuda only makes them fester in her mind. Not only is she someone who can threaten to get closer to Nakano than Senko, but she's also a tanuki, the sworn enemy of foxes. Regardless, she has no ulterior motives, only wanting to integrate with humans due to how much she loves their culture. While most rival-like characters grow a disdain for said rival, Fukuda instead has a deep respect for Senko, as Nakano wouldn't be the man he is without her. While she's willing to set aside her feelings for Senko's sake, it only furthers her doubts of if pretending to be a human was the right choice for her. That's where Nakano swoops back in, reassuring her that there are people who care about her, that he'll always be grateful to coexist with her. Hachiouji was first teased in a chapter as someone who sends Nakano mail on a yearly basis. So, after many years of not seeing him, he barges into Nakano's house to see Senko. While most people would be worried seeing Senko's fox-like features, Hachiouji doesn't question it at all. At the time, all we can do is just assume he's an eccentric weirdo, and while he very much is, there's something deeper than what's shown at the surface. For now though, all we learn about him is that he met Nakano in college. Due to Nakano's curse bringing misfortune to those around him, he remained friendless until Hachiouji chose to approach him. As both of them had a hobby in game development, they were able to hit it off despite Nakano's loner personality. Even now, when they're graduated, Hachiouji still looks fondly on his times with Nakano. Even if Nakano was only dragged along every step of the way, Hachiouji always loved getting to see the smile he brought to his face, the same expression Senko craves. The next time we see him, we finally get the answers we've always craved. While not an unexpected development, we learn that Hachiouji does indeed have a strong sense for the supernatural. That's the reason he never questioned Senko's existence, only being grateful for allowing Nakano to be happy. It's also the reason why he wanted to befriend Nakano to begin with. Although, that's not all it comes down to. Near the end of the manga, we learn that Hachiouji secretly loved Nakano all this time. This moment, while unexpected, is a very good ending for his character. Not only is it a very seamless and natural use of representation, but it also explains the biggest decision he makes in the manga. Only a little bit beforehand, he decided to use his spirit sensing skills to aid Shiro in her goal of destroying evil spirits, dedicating his life to making sure Nakano can live it in peace. With Nakano having learned enough from Gin and Hachiouji, Senko decides that it's finally time to explain the curse to him. For anyone observant enough, the curse uses someone's negative emotions to cause misfortune to those around them. Since we know little bits of Nakano's life before his adulthood, we know that the curse has always been a part of him, that its passing down was entirely genetic. When the curse hit its breaking point, that was when Senko was finally able to realize her dream of pampering him. However, even with Nakano becoming a much happier person, the curse still caused people in his workplace to get sick, only making things harder for himself and his coworkers. If this keeps up, Nakano's curse could destroy the entire world. While the Nakano of the past would have cracked hearing this, the Nakano of now takes it in stride, confident that he'll end up okay because he has Senko by his side. So, if it's Nakano's stress that causes the curse to fester, then he sees only one option to control it. After spending over half of the manga in an abusive workplace, he finally quits. Turning point has become one of my favorite terms in anime, being used in Mushoku Tensei whenever something life-altering happens to the protagonist and the world he's in. Ever since, I've liked to think about the turning points of other series, and Senko-san has earned one of my absolute favorites. This moment was so impactful that many people thought the manga was ending when it came out, this being such a big concern that Rimukuro had to go out of his way to say that the story would still be going. To a lot of people, Nakano's work life felt like the point to his character, when it's not like quitting a shitty job magically solves all of your problems. I only ended up realizing that recently when I finally landed my second job, and while the initial excitement was huge, the reality that I'm still nervous, scared, awkward, socially inept, and incompetent continued to seep in. The point is that Nakano's character arc isn't over yet. In order to dispel the curse, he needs to get past the hurdle of everyone who suddenly quits their job. The job hunt. I spent 3 months looking for my latest job, dealing with many companies not bothering to read my applications and an even smaller amount asking to do interviews with me. While this process is awful in the United States, the horror stories I've heard about Japanese work culture don't even compare to my struggles. It's so bad that there are entire anime dedicated to it, like Real Life, where the main character quit his job and was unable to find anything else. Needless to say, Nakano still has a very long road ahead of him. Luckily for Nakano, he made his decision aware of the consequences, allowing him to assess what he needs to do. Even without a plan, he believes things will work out, and that he wants to spend his time finally appreciating life and relaxing with those he cares about. As a result, we get to see some really nice chapters of Nakano getting to better know those around him. The absolute highlight of this is when Nakano and Kouenji finally get to connect over their shared love of video games. To see a version of Nakano that can be so calm and composed in such a tough situation is absolutely not something he would have been able to do in the earliest chapters, and I think this was the perfect timing in his arc to have such a big change in. The reason why is because it acts as a big step in finally being able to answer the manga's biggest mystery. On a seemingly peaceful day, Nakano answers an unexpected call from his mother, letting him know that the manga will now be borrowing from the anime. While such blatant reuse of a concept may sound bad on paper, I actually think it's quite genius, as these two visits are made by two different Nakanos, one before his development and the other one after he had just made the biggest change in his life. Regardless, the conversation stays about as small talk focused as it was last time, as just like last time, seeing his family isn't the point of this trip. Last time, it was to remind Nakano of how important Senko is to him, while this time, it's so he and Senko can finally meet at the shrine where she first met his ancestor. Before Senko was the wise and reliable person she is now, she was scared and helpless, but one man was willing to take her in despite that. That man was Nakano's ancestor, a well-adjusted man who had helped train Senko in order to take care of him. These would be Senko's happiest memories, spending them with someone she cares so deeply about, but they wouldn't last forever. Eventually, a beastly creature comes to attack Senko, and Nakano's the one to take the blow. When Senko realizes that the disaster was unknowingly caused by her, a result of her escaping from the hatred of the Nine Tails, she is overstruck with grief for what happened. Nakano, instead of sealing the curse, which would take Senko down with it, instead chooses to sacrifice his own life to save Senko's, in the hopes that she can find a way to end the curse herself. After giving her backstory, Senko apologizes for being the reason he was stuck with the curse. But Nakano is just happy to have her by her side, thankful that he's gotten this opportunity at all. Now having an even deeper level of trust in Senko, Nakano truly wants to become someone worthy of her care, and his job search begins. It may go without saying, but the job hunt is a struggle. Under normal circumstances, he'd never be able to get hired, but nothing about Nakano's life is normal. Earlier in the manga, he saved a drunk man from getting crushed, and when he sees that he applied to his company, Nakano gets hired off of his genuine kindness and desire to help others. Having had so much prior experience at the office, he is quickly able to adapt and gain favorability for his competence and kindness. As Nakano is now in the mood to turn his life around, he starts improving his life in other ways, including a move to a new house, which is yet another major life change. In the past, assuming he wouldn't be too exhausted to move in the first place, not much about his social life would have changed from it. That's why it's genuinely interesting to see Kouenji's sadness at no longer being able to see him every day. She cares so much, in fact, that she decides to move to the exact same apartment complex as him. Oh yeah, Fukuda also switched to his job as well. In retrospect, I'm honestly fine with the status quo changing less than it realistically should, but it can certainly be hard to accept how ludicrously contrived this is. At the very least, I think both of their dedication to remain close to him do a good enough job at showcasing how reliable of a person he's become, so it's not like it's all nonsensical. But that's not all that changes. What's by far the best thing to come of Nakano moving are the ways in which he improves his own life. In a video I made about another one of Rimukuro's manga called Show Me Your Love, my main conclusion was that positive things such as happiness and creativity are formed by having relationships that can help give you a sense of belonging and guidance. However, restricting your philosophy only to that one conclusion is clearly quite simplistic. In order to live, you do need to be capable of true independence, and that's what Nakano can finally learn to achieve as he starts helping Senko around the house and getting himself into better physical shape. It becomes abundantly clear at this point that Nakano's finally become a truly happy person. This results in Senko having to settle with this bittersweet feeling, wondering if Nakano no longer needs her. But those fears soon wash away when Nakano uses his sweet tongue to tell her that the best part of his new life is that he gets to spend it with her. Remember what I said about Suzu becoming more relevant later? Well, it isn't until the manga's final third that we finally get to see that happen. When she was introduced, she said that her ultimate goal was to make someone she once knew smile. That person was a boy with a strong spirit sense that eventually couldn't see her. Now, having gained the strength to be seen by others, she meets his grandson, who lets him know that his grandfather died the year prior. This moment is genuinely pretty shocking for this manga, as it explores an idea that has been brushed under the rug for so long, and it's the ridiculous amount of time that the Divine Messenger Foxes live. As Senko's backstory ended in tragedy and Shiro's had been untouched, seeing Suzu lose someone to the simple passage of time really does make for an unexpectedly shocking moment. But even if her time with him was cut so short, she still managed to make him smile, and that alone is enough for him and his family, being the very reason his grandson paid to keep the shrine they met in alive. On an unrelated note, Yotsutani is Nakano's next door neighbor and senpai at work. The catch is that she can see the supernatural, never having been able to talk about it with anyone. That's why she's surprised once she sees Suzu next to her at all times, and it's once Suzu saves her that she finally has a full conversation with the spirit. For so long, Yotsutani's felt so alone, but having met Suzu and sharing her love of fluffy tales with Nakano, she's finally found a place to belong. With those years of isolation finally washing away, she gives a smile that reminds Suzu exactly why she's training herself so hard to begin with. And it's here where she makes a vow to keep protecting Yotsutani from evil spirits, alongside pampering her to her heart's content. After all, she is that man's great-granddaughter. But not everything can go well forever. As more time passes, Nakano's curse only strengthens, and now his company is becoming indistinguishable from his last. While before, Nakano wouldn't have done anything to fix his situation, he's now at a state where he can instantly find solutions. But Senko proposes one of her own. Instead of moving Nakano to the countryside, it's now finally time to lift Nakano's curse. But in order to do so, he needs to seal it with someone of a strong bond. Yes, Nakano needs to get married. The following chapters see him talking to Kouenji, Fukuda, and Yotsutani to see who he'd choose to spend the rest of his life with. While the idea of this harem ending is assuredly silly, it was built up in a way that feels way more natural than it has any right to be. And you can see that as soon as it starts. Kouenji has been around Nakano the longest, and has gotten to see every side of him as a result. Due to his close bond of Senko, she never thought of him as a potential romantic partner, but something surprising happens when she thinks about it. She remembers his kindness, open-mindedness, capability, and the fun they had playing games together. Suddenly, his presence begins to fluster her, realizing how attractive he truly is. But when he rejects her, she realizes that there's fun in having a friend like him, that they don't need to take their relationship further. I really love how this chapter was handled. It was inevitable that some tension would eventually come up, but sometimes a friendship really does just end at that. I know since I've been in a situation like that. I once knew a girl in high school whose personality was very similar to Kouenji, and she was a friend I really enjoyed having around, but I was never attracted to her. If I ever got closer to her, I'm sure I would have thought about my feelings more, but I'm sure I would have eventually come to the same conclusion Nakano and Kouenji did. Those complex emotions only fester further when it's Yotsutani's turn to talk to Nakano. As she's been alone for so long, the idea of spending her life with someone who understands her situation intrigues her. However, she turns Nakano down. It simply hasn't been enough time, and Nakano's clearly never shown any interest in her either. As long as she has Suzu by her side, that's all she needs to be happy. For Fukuda, however, Nakano is all she needs to be happy. She's absolutely thrilled with the idea of living with the person she grew to love, but Nakano's more conflicted. When he sees her, he's only confused at how she could love someone like him, someone who, unlike Senko, has no obligation to be with someone who brings so much misfortune. But love doesn't always need an explanation, and Fukuda can't pin down a specific reason for loving her. While Nakano appreciates the honesty on her end, he himself cannot bring himself to be fully honest with her. Being suspicious of Nakano's indirectness, she asks Sora about it, and she lets her know that Nakano will never be able to see Senko again. When Nakano sees Senko for the final time, you can sense their pain. Senko had lived hundreds of years in loneliness once before, but even so, she's still hurting deep inside. All this time, she knew that her time with him would be limited, so she wanted to keep it brief for so long. But as she continued to spend time with him, she could never turn back. Senko grew to cherish not just Nakano, but Kuroto, his given name. She knew that all of her pampering, Nakano's reliance on her, would only make this moment harder for her, but she stayed with him anyways. Nakano will miss Senko, but he's now finally mature enough to gain peace from the painful feeling of leaving someone he loves behind. Further festering his positive mindset, he tells Senko to meet him again in another 50 to 100 years, when she's finally purified the curse. So when it's finally time for the marriage, Fukuda calls it off at the last minute, because she cares more about Nakano's happiness than her own. For as much as Nakano wants to claim this as the best solution, his lack of a smile on his face gives his true feelings away. Now having left Fukuda in tears, all he can do is say what he truly feels. He wants to spend the rest of his life with Senko, not because he needs her, but because he wants her. Even if it comes to the cost of the entire world, it's what he wants. A selfish desire it may be, but letting Nakano indulge is all Senko has wanted him to do this entire time. Thankfully for him, Senko feels the exact same way. She can't bear to be away from him like she was in his childhood. Having vowed to stay with each other, disaster threatens to strike. The curse takes on a physical form. A baby. She may look innocent now, but she possesses a deep strength to one day take over the entire world. But neither Nakano nor Senko want to kill it. Nakano's thankful to her for introducing him to Senko, while Senko wants to train a fellow spirit of the Nine Tails into a great divine messenger like herself. As such, Nakano wants to do something he would have never been able to do before. He wants to raise her, a tough task he could only do after Senko gave him the strength to become so much more than he once was. Now, it's his goal to help Senko with this new task. I consider this to be the perfect ending for the manga. Nakano, who spent the whole manga getting cared for, ended the story as a caretaker himself. It should go without saying, but this manga holds an incredibly special place in my heart. The story it tells resonates so much that I can't help but get happy whenever I discuss it. Truth be told, this wasn't the first time I wrote about Senko-san. When I was 16, the same year I first saw it, I wrote a 9,000 word long script about how much I loved the anime and manga, but I never released it. Now, as an adult, I'm glad that was the case, since that initial script wasn't all that good to begin with. The script was needlessly dragged out with too much summary in place of a real substantive analysis, and too little discussion of the manga over the anime. When I was writing this video, I said that the main reason for the script being subpar was that it was too long, but funnily enough, this script is actually longer. When I was in high school, I'd intentionally drag out scripts because of how impressive I found a big word count to be, but now, I try to write more minimalistically, since the quality of a script is always much more important to me than the word count. As a result, it should be really telling just how much I love this story when I have that much to say about it. In my original script, I played off this love as a personal thing, that Senko-san was just a 6 out of 10 that I inflated the quality of due to my own attachment to it. Who knows, maybe that is the case. But after loving it just the same 3 years later, I can't help but disagree with my teenage self. In my original script, I was very open about my feelings, about how stressful going to school while pursuing a YouTube career was, and how suffocating it felt knowing that it wouldn't be long before I became an adult. But most surprising of all, I was surprised to read through and hear myself speak of just how bad those thoughts got, how they made me want to end it all. Senko-san may sound stupid from a conceptual level, but that shit helped me get through such a dark time. And when I realized that this series was able to stick out that much while others have since faded from my mind, I wish I could go to my old self and tell him that there's nothing to be ashamed of in loving this masterpiece as much as I do. And I don't use that term lightly. Senko-san, even if many may disagree with me, is a true, bona fide masterpiece. In my videos, I always answer a question that the text provides. Why do we create? Why should we be kind? What is justice? And why should we persist? Were all questions I've answered up to this point. What makes Senko-san so unique is just how many questions it poses to be answered. That's why this story isn't just dumb wish fulfillment. Yes, that may be part of its identity, but it has so much more to it. While I made the thumbnail's question, is it okay to relax? There's even more to it than that. There's a reason I chose to prioritize that one front and center, however, and it's because Nakano wouldn't have been able to learn any other lessons if he never learned how to relax. It was something that I didn't know how to do when I first experienced the story, and it caused me so much strife. In life, there will always be people that tell you that one day you can be happy if you attain this goal of fame or fortune, that you can finally be free once you've climbed that corporate ladder. Well, I fully disagree. The only thing awaiting you on that path is a life of loneliness, and I can't think of a worse feeling to have. Don't get it twisted. I'm not saying it's okay to be lazy, but what I am saying is that spending your time with people who love and care about you is where the best moments of life will come in. Trust me, as someone who never truly valued his relationships, that they're now the best part of my life, and the things that keep me going more than anything else. Reading Senko-san, as silly as it may sound, was what helped me realize that. And I'm making this video to relay the manga's message to those who cherished it like me, or to those who have yet to experience one of my favorite stories. It's a lesson that many people need to take in as well, with the declining economy of our country making the act of living in itself so much more stressful than it's ever been. But allowing yourself to lie down and spend some time with a friend or loved one should be enough to spring those seeds of development. Once you do, maybe you can spread the genuine care and kindness that Nakano is able to throughout the manga. Maybe then, you'll find that your curse turns into good fortune for those around you. To Rimukuro, the creator of this manga, I have nothing but endless gratitude for how your story helped me in a time of need. It truly means the world to me that I could read such a wonderful manga. And with that, we are left on an awfully bittersweet note. It's crazy to think that it's been nearly a year since I've returned to this channel. After a year of ignoring my anime passion projects, burning out with a failing Pokemon channel, I decided to give this channel a try again. I first got the idea when I was at work with nothing else to do, having caught up with all my responsibilities. And it was on that shift that, while hiding from my managers for dear life, I read Show Me Your Love and the Hitman short story. I really don't know why I felt compelled to write about them, but doing so was so much fun. It was then that, even if the videos failed to catch an audience, that I knew I wanted to make these. That's why the absurdly positive responses to those videos have left me the most dumbfounded I've ever been in my 9 years of making YouTube videos. The Hitman video is the single most viewed video I've ever made, and while I'm eternally grateful for that, I also didn't want people to watch that and assume that all of my videos would be just like it. That's why I waited so long to make a Senko-san video, since I knew it would only be a good idea to do so if I had a real vision for how to make it the best I could possibly make it. As a result of waiting that long, I've turned out very proud of this video, but I also want to take this hobby a little more seriously. That's why I recently bought a laptop that I could dedicate to writing, therefore holding myself accountable and making at least one new video every month. I can't be certain that I can achieve that, but that will be my goal from now on. But why am I making this change? Well, it's because I'd rather be productive with my free time than just use it playing video games, and YouTube is what I'd be most likely to have fun spending my time on. This video may be the end of an era, but I have grand plans for the future of this channel. I plan on tackling more mangakas and their lesser known works, more overlooked and niche seasonals that could use some love, and maybe even making another movie-length video like this one that can fully dissect one of my favorite series. It feels shocking to have come this far with the video. For anyone who's here, even when we're well past the Senko-san analysis, I thank you a ton for it. If nothing else, I hope that this can be seen as the definitive analysis of a deeply underrated series that truly does deserve that love. Of course, I'll never be able to know for sure, which is why the joy of making it at all is enough to push me through. But before I leave for good, I do want to remind you that I have a Patreon. Of course, there's no pressure to donate. I understand that my upload schedule makes the donation less enticing, but that's exactly what I want to work on, since I want to use any money I gain both for my survival and to make videos here better. That's precisely why I'm so thankful toward my current patrons, such as my Phantom tier patrons Mystic Owl, Jesse, and Squizzy, and my Confidant tier patrons Regimania, Plasma, and Eternum. If you want to add your name to the list, as well as get plenty of other benefits such as a private Discord server, over 300 scratch video ideas, 500 unlisted videos, early access to my videos, previews of upcoming videos, and my entire Google Drive, you can find it on Patreon. I also have a third tier that no one's bought yet, so perhaps you could be the first name there. All donations are the best way to keep the channel going. Views, likes, and comments help a ton as well. No matter which one of these people you happen to be, I thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you all next time.